All right, everybody, welcome back to another Zbrush Basics. We're back with another semester, so we're going to be creating some new videos. They're going through a lot of basics, not particularly the workflows I would actually use, but just for you to get used to the program. All right, so I'm going to go back to my standard UI. Okay, so this is what we are going to be doing. In this video, we're going to be going over projecting, masking, extracting the widget and the most basic uses, and some sculpting and using brushes and just basic brushes, basic stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is we're going to bring in our skull that we are going to be basically tracing in 3D. Okay, so what I did is I went to load tool, I went to the male skull, loaded it up, and I clicked and dragged it onto my canvas, and then I pressed T to make it active. Perspective is on, so it's actually called perspective distortion. I actually don't want that on, so I'm going to press P, and we're going to get a nice full canvas of what's going on. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our subtool palette right here. We're going to click on the side so we can scroll up. Okay. And we're going to choose this append, and we're going to make or click the sphere 3D. Okay. Next, we're going to click on the sphere, and it's going to switch to this subtool. You might have this off now, so you're probably wondering where your skull is. You just need to make sure that it's on with this icon. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to have everything in 0, 0 space. That way symmetry works in whatever axes we put it on. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to center this skull in 0, 0, because whenever we put in a basic mesh like any of these, they're always imported into 0, 0 space. So we kind of want to bring all this back to 0, 0. So I'm going to click this male skull. I'm going to press W. And the first thing I want to do is I want to put this gizmo in the center of the skull. Okay, and to do that, instead of moving this by hand, they have a feature here called Go to Unmasked Center, Unmasked Mesh Center, and I call this a Google icon. So I just click that, and it's going to go to the center. And the next thing I want to do is I want to send this to home. So basically, what we're going to do is click this, and it's going to go to 0, 0 space. So now we have this in the same position that the basic primitives will be created. And all right, so next thing we want to do is I'm going to use solo down here. You can press solo, and then that will just solo the mesh that you're on and hide everything else, but it's not really hidden because whenever you turn it off, everything's there. So you might want to assign this to a hotkey, but yeah, it's right there if you want to use it. Or alternatively, you can just turn that off. All right. So we're going to press Shift F on our keyboard, and we're going to see the skull and the topology that's associated with it. Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close this subtool by clicking the name, and then I'm going to go down here to polygroups, and I'm going to press auto group. So what that's going to do is every mesh that is its own separate mesh will get its own poly group, right? So if we hold Control and Shift and we click the purple, in this case, it might be blue or orange or red on yours, or gray or whatever it is. We can hide that, right? If we want to inverse that, we just click it again, and it will show us the mandible, right? If we want to bring everything back, we hold Control and Shift and click outside the mesh, and everything should come back. Okay. Alternatively, I just press Control Z. You can drag this box, and it will automatically switch between what is hidden and what is not hidden. Okay. All right. So I'm going to press Control and Shift and click outside the mesh, and now we have everything here. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get a rough approximation of the sphere around here, just so we can get used to the move brush, the standard brush, and a feature called project, which you will be using quite often. So let's get into it. All right. First, I'm not concerned with the topology of this. I prefer Dynamesh. Okay. So I'm going to close my subtool. I'm going to go to geometry. I'm going to go to Dynamesh, and I'm going to go, for right now, I'm just going to go down to 32, okay? And I'm going to click Dynamesh, and I'm going to press X on my keyboard so I have symmetry, okay? Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press Transp right here, okay? That's going to allow me to see through the mesh, but I'm also going to turn off Ghost so I can see a little bit better resolution for my eyes. For you, you might like Ghost. For me, I don't. So what I'm doing is pressing S once, and it's bringing up my brush size, which I think is a little bit more effective. Instead of going up here and changing it and then guessing what the size is, you can just put your brush over what you need it to be, press S, and get the appropriate brush size, okay? And I mean click S, not press S. So what I'm going to do is get big brush size because I'm not concerned about all the details right now. All I'm concerned about is just getting the rough shape of all this, okay? And I'm going to hold Control and drag a box outside of the mesh, and it's going to remesh it for me if I have this Dynamesh option on in the Geometry tab, okay? So I'm going to get an appropriate brush size, and I'm going to dig in. I'm going to re-Dynamesh. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go in an oblique angle, meaning diagonal, and I'm going to remesh. I'm going to go down here, remesh, smooth, remesh, press BMV, and I'm going to get my move brush, and I'm just going to move all this up. And again, we're not going to be precious about this right now because we're going to change a lot of things. So don't worry about getting everything perfect, but definitely get it in the ballpark, right? Maybe first base, maybe second base. Who knows? All right, maybe close, very close to the end zone, right? So we can just get a touchdown and score a basket. Okay. I'm going to get the muzzle of the mouth, and we're just going to ensure that we don't have a huge distance between the reference skull and the mesh. And so what I'm doing is using the standard brush and holding Alt, and that is allowing me to dig in. If I let go of Alt, it allows me to sculpt out, okay? I use the Alt feature with pretty much every brush besides the select view. And I definitely suggest that you try the Alt method for any of that, okay? So this brush is the move brush, and just getting it into place. This skull is asymmetrical, so for right now, I'm just worried about the right side, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so here, just making sure that the mesh is well within the orbit and touching the temple of the skull, and trying to ensure that we don't have a huge amount of distance around. Like right here, we have this huge distance that I kind of want to close up. And again, not too precious. I just don't want it looking, you know, sloppy and stiff. Okay. And I'm going to get my standard brush. I'm going to remesh by holding Control and dragging a box outside the mesh, and then using my standard brush and getting this and smoothing it and remeshing. And here, not going to be very concerned at this moment with this, okay? All right, so we got it pretty close enough for us to move to the next stage. Let me just ensure that's very close, right here in the mandible, okay? Alrighty, so now what we're going to do is we're going to hold, we're going to get this Dynamesh, and we're going to kick it up to 128 for right now. We're going to hold Control, drag a box outside the mesh, and it's going to give us a little bit more resolution. So hopefully you can discern that the higher you go, the longer it's going to take and the more resolution you're going to have, and the lower you go, the less time it's going to take and the lower the resolution you will have. So it's make sure to not go up to the highest point immediately. You want to make sure that your forms are set before you start going into detail. It is fun. I love detail. Okay. But you got to have the form, or else it just is detail. It's not telling the story. It's not illustrating the character. It's not taking it to the next level. It's just detail around here, around there. You know what I mean? So you just want to make sure that you get your forms and your rhythms before you move into detail. All right, so just getting this a little bit closer by holding Alt and using my standard brush and getting closer. Okay. Alrighty. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Control. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this lower mandible minus the teeth. Okay. And I'm not worried about the inside of it. I'm only worried about the outside because we're about to make it dual-sided. So there's no reason for us to do that. Okay. So I'm going to press Shift F. So I'm not looking at the wireframe anymore. And I'm going to hold Control and Alt and click outside of the mask, but on the mesh. And what that's going to do is it's going to tighten that mask up so we can get a better approximation of what it's going to look like. Okay. So I'm just getting as close as I can because the more time we spend here, the easier it's going to be to manipulate and to get what we want out of it. Okay. So I'd say that's pretty good. All right. So I'm going to hold Control and Alt and click on the mesh outside of the mask, and it's going to sharpen it up. Then I'm going to close my geometry tab over here on the right palette, open up my subtool, click on the outside of the menu right here to the right or to the left. You can click and scroll up. Okay. So I want you to go to extract here, and let's just press extract and let's see what happens. Okay. I'm going to turn off transparency, and I'm going to press extract again. So it's making this mesh for us, right? And it's jagged, and that's fine. We're not really concerned with that right now. We're just making sure it's not unusable. Okay. But as soon as I click outside the mesh and rotate, it disappears. And that's because it's just giving you a preview. It's not giving you the final mesh. Okay. But we're just making sure that everything's usable, and we're only worried about the right side or the left side, whichever one you chose. Okay. So we're going to press extract, and then we're going to press accept. And whenever we do that, then it's going to take us directly to that mesh. Okay. And we've actually created something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press solo here, and I'm going to press Shift F. And what you can see is that made it 3D, right? Based on the thickness that we set here. So if you want to make it thinner, you want to make it thicker, you can change that here. Okay. But the connection point it made very simple, but what it did is it pretty much ripped off the geometry that we had. So if I click between the two, you'll see it's the same geometry, right? And all it did was just smooth and create all this new geometry right here. Okay. So that's fine because we wanted to create a mesh and we don't really care what it looks like at this moment. It comes masked the way that you had it masked. So we want to clear that first. And what I want to do is kind of smooth this stuff out and make it a little bit more usable. Before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this male skull. I'm going to turn off the visibility of our sculpted skull. And I'm just going to Control Shift and click this, and then go back to our extracted piece and turn off solo. And then I'm going to move this into place as best I can. Not going to be very precious with it at this point. Okay, just kind of getting it there. For me, what I'm concerned about the most is this coronoid process right here. and making sure that's kind of represented in the main forms. Okay. So you can see that whenever I'm pulling, it's pulling from both sides. So if I want independence of that, I can Control Shift click and I can kind of bring this out, smooth it, bring it out, right? Kind of get it into place. And that way I'm only dealing with one side at the moment, but just be careful that you don't forget that you have a 3D object underneath here. Okay. So just spending a little bit of time cleaning things up, getting it shaped around, and getting it set up like this. And for this, I guess for this time, let's just keep it on the right side so everything fits whenever we create it. So boom, boom. And now we're going to get it as close as we can, kind of smooth it out. We're not going to be too precious at this moment because we're going to make it a little bit more usable in just a moment. Okay. So after that, Control Shift click on the outside, and then I'm going to Control Shift click the purple. It might be a different color in your case. We're going to kind of move this because this is going to be the inside, and try to get it into place. Okay. And you can see it's like laying on the, pretty much on the inside. And we want this, on the outside of the mandible. And so we kind of want to get it a little bit more on the inside. Okay. And again, not being too precious at this moment, just roughly getting it in. And you definitely don't want to concern yourself with every detail when you're first starting, right? You just want to roughly block things in, try to capture a feeling or something like that whenever you're speed sculpting, before you start putting in pores and, tertiary details. Okay, so Control Shift click, and now we've got kind of like the thickness and everything that we're looking for. And we can make our final adjustments if we really want to. In this case, I'm pretty happy with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to geometry. I'm going to close Dynamesh. I'm going to get ZRemesher, and I'm going to keep groups on whenever I perform this action. All right. So in this case, I'm going to click this target polygon count, and this 3 is represented by thousands. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to go 2.5. You can leave it default. It's up to you. Okay, but make sure you have keep groups on. So now what I'm going to do, we're going to get this into view so you can kind of see the difference that we're going to have. All right, so now it made it nice and smooth and took into account the overall shape that we're going for because we went down in a low target poly count, right? Which is kind of what we want because we weren't trying to be too precious. We're just kind of putting things into place, right? So now we've kind of got our mandible. I'm just going to smooth some things out so it doesn't look too robotic. And all right, so this is good enough for now. So now what I'm going to do is open up my subtool menu, go back to my male skull. I'm going to invert that selection by holding Control and Shift and dragging a box outside of the mesh. And then I'm going to go back to my sphere. And remember how I said don't be too precious? And that's because we're going to get rid of a lot of things now. So I'm going to turn off this mandible we just created. I'm going to turn transparency back on. And we are just going to now move this mesh up. And again, don't be precious. Don't be precious. All of this will take care of itself in just a few moments. So just do your best to get it in the general area. Okay. And I'm going to press Shift F so you can kind of see what I'm doing. And again, I'm not very worried about the teeth at this moment, because we are going to find those from somewhere else. And we'll take care of that in the next class. For those of you watching on YouTube, this is for my university students. and I do teach it, live. So if you're interested in any of my online courses, you can go to the XMD Academy. I have a 10-week course on anatomy, creating characters, or creating characters for collectibles. So yeah, it's really, really good. It's live and or on demand, and I'm constantly updating it after each semester. And this project that we're actually going through, which are just going to be the basics, we're not going to go into deep detail on this YouTube. If you're interested on the deep detail, you can go to the XMD Academy or take my course at the university. But other than that, we're just going to go over some basic stuff on this. Okay, and so back here, using the move brush and just ensuring that we've got a general idea of what we're going for. Here, I'm going to use the standard brush, hold Alt, and dig in, dig in, dig in, dig in, smooth, 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 dig in, dig in, dig in, dig in, dig in, and just approximate it. Okay, right there. You see the distance right here. Well, it's different on both sides, but I still want to kind of get it close. All right, so boom. Like that, like that. And I'm going to press, I'm going to get back to my standard brush by pressing BST. And you can see how quickly you can move between brushes. And it's highly effective whenever you're like in the zone and you're creating and you need to not think about the technical and just move between brushes as you need them. So hotkeys are definitely useful. Okay, here we go, using the move, just approximating things. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to use the project feature because we don't want to spend our time getting, sculpting this by hand whenever they already have something for this specific purpose. Okay, so what it is right here, right above extract is project. So you can just press project and you can see what happens, right? So what it's doing is it's projecting what is visible to this mesh that we're on, right? So if I turned everything on, it would try to project this mandible that we created on there, right? For right now, we just want the top of the skull, okay? What we are looking for is we're looking for the mesh to pretty much be married to our reference male skull here, which is usually referenced with something like this, okay? And then we have peaks where it's too far for our distance to project, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna turn off symmetry because we're to this point where we can start individualizing sides, okay? So I'm gonna press X. I'm gonna get, in this case, you can use a standard brush, form soft brush. I'm going to use the clay buildup. If you want to use that, it's BCB on the hotkey, boy, Charlie, Bravo. Okay, just getting it a little bit closer by holding Alt and then pressing project, and there we go. Okay, here we can probably accomplish a lot of it by just smoothing. Not every solution requires sculpting, and again, you don't have to be that precious about it because whenever you project, it's going to fix a lot of that for you, and you can just smooth, project, boom. Okay, here, pretty big distance, so I'm gonna get a bigger brush, project whatever it starts going through, smooth the deformations, project, and we're getting here. Okay, so why is this important? Okay, well, we just went over ZRemesher, right, where we saw that it took the Dynamesh topology and it kind of organized it for us. Well, if we have a Dynamesh sculpt with a lot of detail and we don't like the topology that Dynamesh is giving us and we want to ZRemesh it, we still want to keep our detail. So what we would do is we would duplicate our Dynamesh, ZRemesh one of them, and then project like we are right now from one to the other. So that way we get a more organized mesh and we get all this detail. Right? Okay, and just getting it close enough. We are going to be creating the holes here, so definitely stay for that. It's a pretty simple operation. And project all. Project all. Getting it closer, project all. Smoothing, project all. Right? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Right, smooth, 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 project all. And we're not going to see the bottom of this skull, so I'm not very concerned with it. I just want to make sure it's not a jumbled mess. Right? And just want to make sure this is nice and close, nice and close. Project it, kick back, project, smooth, project. All right, so on this part, we're probably just going to speed time lapse through while I hone all this in, but it's pretty much the same. It's the same result over and over again, okay? Or the same process. Dig in, project, smooth. Dig in, project, smooth. Dig in, project, smooth. Build up, project, smooth. Either way you need it, okay? So we'll see you at the end of the time lapse. All right, so originally I was talking on a lot of this stuff, but for some reason OBS decided to delete one of the specific mic track that I was recording on. So there's going to be some Boolean things going on here later on whenever we create the hole for the temporalis to feed into the coronoid process. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to narrate all that because OBS decided to just cut that mic track. So we will go over that in class, in live class. If you have a question, you can definitely look up Boolean operations and all that stuff, and the rules of all that on your own on the Zbrush site, or even Mike Pavlovich's site. Unfortunately, I have client work and I'm not able to re-record this whole part. So we will hopefully next time OBS won't do that to us, and we can have a nice, clean, concise video on the next go around. But again, if you see something that I haven't gone over already and you're confused about it, just wait until we get into class and we'll go over all that for you. Okay. So enjoy the time lapse, and I hope you learned something. And again, if you have any questions, just put them down in the chat. We're going to be going over a lot of basic things coming up, and definitely stay tuned. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you next time.